Dr. Wright says we look great. Now he's playing politics, Ghazala.
So
But
there's
Dr.
two
Wright,
of you, two Dr. Wrights
that's
there.
right. Tommy is the president.
Oh, I'm sorry.
He came on board 3 years ago.
Any relation?
Well, it's hard to say. We got family from some of the same places, but he says that he calls me brother anyway. So,
Okay. Well, hello to Dr. Wright. Good to see you. I don't think we had a chance to meet yet.
you will, I'm sure. Absolutely. Well, Diane, it's 6 o'clock. So if you would like to kick off your introduction, we'll roll from there.
Certainly, I sure will. Good evening, everyone. My name is Diane Lester. I'm the Dean of Student Success at Southwest Virginia Community College, and I'm so pleased to be with you tonight.
And I am Brian Wright. I'm the Dean of Humanities and Social Sciences, as well as the Interim Dean of Math, Science, and Health Technologies. And it's a pleasure to be here and to have you here.
Absolutely. We're so delighted to have Senator Hashmi with us tonight. And we want to take just a moment at the beginning of this evening to express our condolences to Senator Hashmi for the recent loss of her father. And it comes at a somewhat time where we're feeling a lot of the same feelings with the loss of our dear colleague and friend, Gerald Fletcher, who I understand you had the pleasure of meeting and being friends with over the years.
Yes, I certainly did. And thank you so much, Diane and Brian. I'm delighted to be here. And Gerald was such a dear friend. And Brian shared the news of his passing with me a few days ago. And I wanted to just share my condolences to the family at Southwest for his loss. I know how very much important he was to all of the colleagues as well as to the students. I worked with Gerald on the journal, the VCCS Journal Inquiry for many years. And in fact, he was such a wonderful and pivotal figure in that journal. He had a very sharp eye for the article submissions that we had, and then for editing and for making sure that the material inside that journal was reflective of the work that was happening throughout the VCCS. So a beloved colleague, and I'd love to share with the folks at Southwest that it's my intent to put in a memorial resolution to honor Gerald and his work. And I will be doing that in the next session that we have for the General Assembly, and we will be able to honor him for his work for the entire Commonwealth and all the students.
That's amazing. Thank you so much.
That is absolutely fantastic. And like I've told Ghazala before, if anyone was deserving, it would be Gerald Fletcher, because he was truly dedicated to student success, and he was dedicated to the Virginia Community College system. You don't hang around 37 years somewhere and not believe in what you're doing. So absolutely. Thank you so much for that offer, Ghazala. We think it will be fantastic. His wife and daughter will be so happy. They just will. It's just wonderful. So just a little bit about Ghazala herself. Just so you know, Senator Hashmi, and I have to say this, Ghazala Hashmi, yes, that is an American name. Isn't that right, Ghazala?
That is.
So she has been a long friend. I think you were, what, 25 years with the Virginia Community College system at Reynolds Community College as faculty and administrator.
Close to 20 years, yes.
Close to 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
Goodness gracious. Well, believe it or not, I'm 20 years at Southwest. So good grief. So let's see. You have been elected senator, and you are the 10th district, right?
Yes.
And you were the first Muslim to be elected to the Senate. And you are for first Muslim female, I'm sorry. And you also defeated an incumbent in the Senate. Both of those are, in a way, pretty amazing. So first of all, how does it feel to be the first female Muslim in the Senate in Virginia? And what's your secret to defeating an incumbent? That seems to be pretty sly.
I didn't mean to be sly, but I'll just share a little bit. And you were right, the first time I'm actually the first Muslim American in the Virginia
Oh,
Senate. And then we have two Muslim Americans in the House of Delegates. So,
okay.
but this seat in particular, I have the honor of representing a good portion of the city of Richmond, as well as a large area of Chesterfield County, and then all of Powhatan County. And this district was held by our Republican colleagues for, I think, close to 38, 40 years. And it was a challenge for me as a political novice to take on this task of unseating a incumbent, and in a district where a Democrat had not held a seat for many decades, and no woman has actually ever held a seat either. And so I had some things stacked against me, but I'll tell you, I was motivated to run because of the work in the community college system. I don't think you have any better viewpoint of what's happening in Virginia and what's happening to Virginians in particular, except through the lens of the community college. As you well know, we see the issues and the concerns and the necessary need for support through our students, through our work, right in front of us every single day of our lives, and the efforts that we do in the community college. And that was a motivation for me. I knew we could do better in the General Assembly. I knew that our state government could do better for Virginians. And I was determined to be able to share that message and to reach as many people through that conversation as I could. And I was able to get a support from a large coalition of different folks, a lot of people who understood the critical need for change and representation of issues that were really important to them. So I was really happy to have that support and to be the voice of a lot of people.
So just an addendum to that, how difficult was it to build this coalition? Were there particular spots that were more resistant than others?
Well, absolutely. And when I first I announced in a primary. So there was already another individual running in the primary who was more established in the Democratic Party, had done a lot of work already in the Democratic Party, and had run 2 races herself for Congress. And so that was a challenge for me to be able to convince folks, even in my own party, that I was the right candidate to take on this particular race. And the coalition was built across diverse groups of folks. I think people saw a resonance in what my message was across different communities. Educators heard my message. I think women in Chesterfield County in particular, who wanted to see more active engagement around women's concerns and issues. They were responsive to the message. And then as an immigrant myself, I was able to connect with a lot of people who felt that they had not been represented in previous election cycles in the General Assembly. And so having a coalition of a lot of different and diverse individuals was really important to get that momentum building and get the kind of effort we need to run a successful campaign.
Well, you did a good job. And not only did you get elected, but you won by what, 54% of the vote?
I
Wow,
believe that was the final.
that's
Yes.
no
So
small feat.
that's exactly right. No small feat. Virginia politics are notoriously strange at
Very.
times. So.
Very.
Well, thank you so much. It's very inspiring and a lot of good motivation behind your story there. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of your family's path in the United States, and how did they react to your decision to get into politics?
Oh, well, thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit of this background. As you mentioned, my dear father passed away just a few weeks ago, March 9th. And it was really his vision, his journey to the United States that brought us here. And as I shared with you and Brian just a few minutes ago, I was just working on his obituary, which was giving me an opportunity to reflect on his good efforts. So a strange thing happened in 1964 for my dad. I was born in the middle of that summer in July, and the same day that I was born, he also received a telegram informing him that he had received a fellowship to the University of South Carolina to come and work on his doctoral studies in international relations. And it was a new program that was starting at USC. The director of the program was Richard Walker, who later became the ambassador to South Korea under Reagan's administration. But Dr. Walker reached out to my dad, who had applied to the program, and he said, "You would be our first international students in a brand new program that we are starting at USC." So my father had a dilemma to leave his young family behind and come be a graduate student here in South Carolina, and it wasn't an easy choice. But he made that bold step, and that's what really led the path for us to come eventually and immigrate. So my dad worked on his degree at USC as he was finishing up in 1969. My older brother, myself, I was 4.5 years old, and my mom traveled to join him. He had received his first teaching opportunity in Georgia at Georgia Southern University. And that's where I grew up, in a very small college town. Loved the environment there and have wonderful memories. And so that was our immigration story. I always shared on the campaign trail that Savannah, Georgia was my Ellis Island. And I have vivid memories of landing in Savannah, meeting my dad for the first time, and then really being inspired by him. He was a college professor, and I knew at a young age that I wanted to teach college just like he did. And I was very inspired to be engaged in the academic life. And certainly when I decided to run for office, since he taught political science and American government, he was just absolutely thrilled. And my biggest cheerleader watched the campaign, gave me advice, and has followed every piece of legislation as well. So that's been a part of his legacy to me.
That's wonderful. I think that it speaks a little bit to you as a parent that works in education and higher education as well. Our kids are watching, especially over the last year, being home, working from home in the pandemic. Some of us joke and say, our children are learning an awful lot, about education and about how to work and how to do things. So it sounds like your dad was really strong too.
Absolutely.
What was the best campaign advice he gave you?
He just said, make sure that, well, he had started when I was 10 years old, actually. He forced me and my brother and sister to engage in public speaking competitions. So I don't know if you're familiar with the Optimist Club, but down in Georgia, the Optimist always held their annual oratorical contest. So my brother and sister and I were constantly every year competing in these oratorical. So I think the best advice he had given me was a long time ago. He said, always speak with confidence, always be able to present yourself to an audience. And I am thankful for his coercion to public speaking. But with this campaign in particular, he certainly advised me to be true to my message, to maintain integrity, and to always be conscious of what my actions and words might mean for the people around me. And I've held that true to my heart as I worked on the campaign and now in office as well.
It's wonderful advice.
Excellent, excellent. So with your position in the Senate now, how do you see Virginia politics changing, especially with the rise of politicians like yourself in state government? Are women in big part the future of Virginia politics?
Mhm. You know, I think we saw across the country and also certainly in Virginia a tremendous role of women's voices and women's activism, particularly in the last 5, 6 years. And you don't have to be an elected official to actually play a role and to have a significant voice in so many of these changes. So I think just the activism of women that we saw has been a critical driver of seeing more women elected to office, inspiring more women such as myself to think that one could and should run for office. So that kind of impetus has been very much critical and foundational for the changes we're seeing. And we have organizations such as Emily's List, and then it's franchise Virginia's List here in Virginia. We have programs such as Emerge for women who want to run for office. So more training programs, more opportunities for women to think about how they might balance work, life, family with engagement in politics. All of that has been part of a larger movement. And so with the election of more women now in the state houses, I think we're seeing the government itself change in significant ways. And I think one of the critical ways in which we're seeing issues change is that we have a centering of women's, what are typically identified as women's concerns in our policy discussions. And I am always cautious when I talk about women's issues because I fundamentally believe, as I would think many of you fundamentally believe, that women's issues are really basically all of our issues, their community issues, their family issues. But we've seen enhanced conversation now in Virginia over the last few years on issues such as robust childcare access. And the pandemic has shown us how absolutely vital effective childcare services are, not just for families, but really for our entire economy. Economies collapse because we didn't have the childcare opportunities in place for women. So that as an issue has become fundamentally important and centered in our policy considerations. Issues such as access to reproductive rights, reproductive health care, access to the issues of early childhood education, similar to childcare, is important. We've also been seeing a centering of the work of low-income professions, and these are professions that have been largely held by women, and so they have not been as effectively supported or resourced in the way that they should be. But again, now we're seeing a shift in that conversation, a need to prioritize farm labor. Many women are in that industry. And with the breakdown of the food supply system, we've seen how very critical it is to support farm labor, domestic work, caregivers, teachers and healthcare professions, all of these areas in which women do predominate, have been highlighted as very, very critical, not just for the Commonwealth, but for the entire country. And there's greater willingness now to think about how to support and also enable people in these professions to flourish and to have a living wage. So those are really critical issues. Then, of course, we've seen a lot of discussion around the issues of sexual harassment, domestic violence, concerns in which oftentimes women suffer disproportionately to men. So I think that's what we see when we have more women in office. We see a heightened conversation around these concerns, which I think are fundamentally critical to a stable and thriving community. So hopefully we'll continue to make progress in these areas.
It's just with all diversity, it just makes our view of the world clearer in many ways, makes the rainbow brighter when we look at points of view from every citizen.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And diversity is so important. And I'll just share a little bit about what it means for me to be a Muslim in the Virginia Senate. You know, it sounds a little naive when I say this, but my first thought in running wasn't that, oh, I'm going to be the first Muslim or the first anything. I don't think many people think of that. But I was truly humbled and also quite overwhelmed by the reaction of many people who understand the significance of having diverse representation and different perspectives brought into the sphere, especially of government. And this need to recognize that America is complex, it is diverse, and that immigrant communities, which often have, put their head down and focused on doing well, striving, getting established in the country and the new society, that now immigrant voices and immigrant experiences are also being brought into other realms of our community, and government is a very important one for that. I've had so many parents tell me how their children have reacted seeing someone with a name like mine. And that's why my tagline was throughout the campaign, Ghazala Hashmi is an American name. On the one hand, I wanted everybody to understand that it's not an odd name, it is an American name, because America is so complicated and very much a country that reflects our global society in so many ways. But I also really wanted children of immigrants to understand, children of immigrants and who are often teased or bullied because of their odd name, that they are American, and they're as American as someone with the name Brian Wright, and that they would and they did respond to that. I had a lot of parents tell me how their children were really excited to see someone like them with similar background like them running for office, and that was really important for them as a family.
Absolutely. Well, it's life-changing for children to see someone that looks like them or sound, has a similar name, and realize for the first time that they can do that, that that's an option for them as they grow. So thank you for that. It's a big contribution.
As I mentioned before, Ghazala, your family is a prime example. Your own children are successful. Your own siblings are very successful. When we set patterns like this, they're just bound to be repeated. That's just the way things work. We have actually a question, if you don't mind. It's from Tracy Wright, our First Lady at Southwest. And she asks, have you noticed a change in how the legislative body works and handles its business as more women are elected?
That is such a great question, First Lady Wright. I've got colleagues in the Senate who have shared when they first began working in the General Assembly, there was not even a ladies' bathroom in the Capitol. And just to imagine how, a few decades ago, women were so fundamentally excluded that there wasn't even space for them, physical space for them. And so certainly the entree of women into the political world, and not just through elected officials, but up and down the government, whether it's cabinet positions or other offices in the administration, we see a lot of women taking very important roles. And I think in terms of handling the business, we are still a minority. We still need to make ourselves heard, and we still need to insist on ensuring that issues that matter to women, children, families are prioritized in this conversation. And so, you know, one issue that we've seen as women, my colleagues, female colleagues in the Senate, one thing we've recognized is that there are some committees in our Senate committees that are almost exclusively male and male dominated. So there are certain committees in which there's only one woman representing women for Virginia on that Senate committee. And so we have to do better. We have to balance the equation so that there are more perspectives that are represented on committees, especially because committees are where the decisions are made, where bills go to die if they're not going to be supported. And having more women in a position to be able to speak and argue and vote for legislation that matters to families is critically important. So, you know, we can't be satisfied with having 11 women as we currently have out of the 40 Senate seats in Virginia. We need more of a balance so that we get a balancing perspective on the legislation that's being offered and then voted upon.
Okie doke. So when will we have our first female governor?
Well, we have a lot of women running this year. We've got Jennifer McClellan, who I am supporting and have endorsed, a dear friend and colleague of mine, my neighbor in a neighboring district here in Richmond. We have Jennifer Carroll Foy, another Democratic candidate for governor, and then we have folks on the Republican side. We've got Amanda Chase running, so we've got, and I hope I'm not leaving anyone out. That's always the danger of naming names. But we do have women running, and I sure hope that my personal desire is to see Jennifer McClellan get elected as our first, not just as our first woman governor, but our first African-American woman governor. What a demonstration of thought and progress that will be for Virginia to lead the country as a Southern state in this particular regard.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I don't see any more questions coming in just yet.
Well, if you don't mind, I'd love to talk a little bit about the work that we did just this particular legislation cycle on community college issues.
Yes, that'd be wonderful.
I am so excited about the G3 program, which I'm sure you folks are excited about as well. And what was really wonderful for me is that, you know, I saw it at its inception when I was working at Reynolds Community College and saw the opportunity to make huge changes for so many students. And the fact that we were now able to pass the legislation and to fund it appropriately is just really exciting. So G3, as you all know, is get skilled, get a job, give back. And what is particularly, I think, wonderful about this program is the way in which it's linked to areas of workforce development that we absolutely have throughout the Commonwealth. So focusing on industries such as manufacturing, technology, computer skills training, and helping to bolster our teacher pipeline, our early childhood education pipeline, and targeting healthcare professions. We have such a shortage in the Commonwealth in these key professions. And oftentimes, you know, when we have opportunities to fill positions with skilled and trained workers, we don't have the workers with the credentials to be able to step into these professions, some of which are high-paying professions and really wonderful opportunities for folks. And so now with G3, we will be able to not only have the financial support for so many Virginians to be able to get credentials. G3 provides 2 years of college funding for individuals, and it's not just for tuition, but would cover costs such as childcare, if there are childcare expenses, some allowances for textbooks, for other financial assistance, because you and I know that a lot of times when our students leave the academic world, it's not because they don't have the capacity to perform academically. Instead, it's because of financial concerns. I've had students who dropped out of my class because they had $500 of car repairs, and they could not financially manage the car repair, which meant they could not come to class and they could not finish their program. And that kind of difficulty and challenge becomes oftentimes an overwhelming barrier for so many of our students to be able to get their degrees. And so G3 is going to hopefully address a lot of those outside concerns that impact student success. Ultimately, I'm hoping that it will help our students go full-time, so that we know if students are enrolled full-time, they're more likely to succeed, more likely to complete and earn their degrees. And we will then also be able to ensure that these wonderful jobs and careers that are available will get filled by our community college students. And then, of course, as we know, these are stackable credentials. And so our students don't need to stop if they don't want to at 2 years, if they want to continue to gain those academic skills as they're working. Also, hope, if they want to transfer to a 4-year institution, they can continue that progress. And education is just so transformative for the lives. It's not just one life that's affected, it's the life of that entire family. That is really remarkably redefined in many ways by that academic success. So I'm thrilled that we're able to move in this direction.
We are so excited as well. Can you talk to us a little bit about kind of the excitement that was building last year as we were moving towards G3 implementation, and then when COVID hit and the budget kind of had to take a different direction? How was that when you had kind of worked on it, and then to be able to see it come back around and even better than it was before, I think.
Yeah, that was, well, we were all, struggling so hard with the budget. We had passed a wonderful budget in 21, and we're excited to see the transformation it would bring, especially to K-12 and to higher education and many other areas that Virginians need. And then the day we concluded session was also the same day that the governor declared the state of emergency, and everything changed for us, for the entire state, and for the entire globe. And having to readjust to all of those realities, and really not knowing what the future was going to look like, what the next few months were going to look like, was quite overwhelming in many ways. So knowing that Virginia has weathered a good bit of this storm, and that we were able to regain a significant part of our financial resources. And Virginia is actually in a better place than many of our states are, because we have the federal government and all the employees that were able to maintain their jobs in Northern Virginia. We've got the military bases and the significant work that is part of that. We were able to do well, and then to be able now to reallot that funding for these critical programs has been truly wonderful. But I think, what we saw in COVID really highlighted that these are areas that absolutely need funding, and that our path forward is actually a response to the pandemic, and that we will be able to make the economy more resilient, make our folks, give them better opportunities to move into careers and sustain themselves and their families. So all of these were areas that COVID exposed as critical and urgent, and we know that these dollars are going to make a huge difference for Virginia.
Yeah, really reinforced what was happening. So that's wonderful.
Absolutely. So, Senator Hashmi, you make a very good point when you talk about the wonderful things that Virginia has, the federal government, our military bases, but the western part of the state doesn't necessarily share in a lot of that. And I know that you are not our senator, you represent the Richmond metro area, but what have you seen as something that might benefit even us in the Southwest as far as your work in the Senate?
And that's such a wonderful question. You know, as I do go around, I've had limited opportunities because of the pandemic to actually travel around the state as much as I would like to. But you know, as I do meet people from throughout Virginia, one thing that I'm struck by are the large differences. We have to acknowledge that there are significant differences among our communities, you know, with the kind of issues of large metropolitan areas, and then the concerns of our folks in the Tidewater region. Northern Virginia is so different in its own ways, and then our rural communities. And I have the good fortune of representing a district that really encompasses a pretty broad swath of Virginia. So Powhatan is in my district, all of Powhatan, and it is a rural community. Chesterfield is our suburban viewpoints here. And then I have a significant part of the city. And so very different communities and very different viewpoints, perspectives, and priorities. One thing I've learned, though, also is that there are fundamental issues that we all share. And I can go anywhere in the state and I can talk to people of different backgrounds who will always express their important focus points, and that is on good quality education for their children. Everybody wants to see that happen for their families. People want access to good health care. It's not just insurance, but actual healthcare services that address their needs, and concern about the environment. These are not partisan issues. People are focused on all of these. And you mentioned transportation already. That is another concern that people across the Commonwealth share, and focus on the economy. So in considering what unites us rather than what divides us, I think is fundamentally important. One thing that we understand for your communities in Southwest Virginia especially is the need for high quality broadband access. And we learned hard lessons in COVID. It impacted the education of our children in these areas. It impacted your students in our community colleges and higher education institutions. It impacted access to medical needs, as many parts of our state moved into telemedicine, telehealth services. We can't do that without quality broadband access in Southwest Virginia. And it also exposed the critical need for economic recovery. Businesses, especially our small businesses, need to have that access in order to thrive and recover from these financial situations. And being able to telework, as many of our folks were able to do, was a luxury for folks in those professions that actually first allowed them to telework, but then they had the access to internet services to be able to do that. That shouldn't be a luxury. Internet broadband access is a fundamental utility. And we've seen how very clearly it's a fundamental utility, just like electricity is.
Yes.
And we have to make sure that everyone in the Commonwealth, whether it's our unserved areas or underserved areas, have access to that. And so broadband has become a central priority. We put significant funding around it, in this particular legislative session. We're certainly going to see more funding coming in because of the federal dollars. And I'm hoping that we will be able to ramp up the speed by which we get households, businesses connected all across the Commonwealth. And the priority funding is being directed towards those unserved areas that we have in Virginia.
Okay. Well, Ghazala, Tracy Wright wanted to tell you thank you for all your work on G3. It's a major game changer, she says. And we also have a question from an attendee, Dustin Keith. Yep. He says, hello, Senator Hashmi. I am the chair of the Upper Tennessee River Roundtable and supporter of environmental protections. I was excited to see that Governor Northam signed the polystyrene ban bill that you co-patroned. Could you talk a little bit about the impact of that bill?
Well, thank you for that question, Dustin. I think it's such an important step forward to ban polystyrene foam. And basically, these are the kind of takeout containers that we see in our restaurant industries. There was you always have to balance so many issues. Our folks in the restaurant industry, and especially small restaurant business owners, were legitimately concerned about the impact that this ban may have on their businesses, because the costs may go up to switch to other containers, or they'll face as a result, they would face higher expenses and so forth. So there's always a need to balance the environmental concerns with the economic concerns of our small business communities. And so this bill in particular, we tried last year to pass it. We had some struggles along the way, and it came out in a modified form. But I think this year it's a wonderful pathway for us in Virginia towards banning polystyrene, that we have a timeline built in so that our industries can begin that transition process, and so that we can have opportunities to look at other environmentally friendly packaging and containers that are more easy to recycle or to repurpose in some way, and that we will in effect ban something that is environmentally destructive and that causes great harm after the fact as well, not just in landfills, but the ways in which it continues to leach into the environment and impacts our supply, our systems throughout the environment. So it was a very necessary bill, and I was happy to support it, and certainly happy to see that we were able to gain support this session in its passage.
There seem to have been so many changes in Virginia, and especially when we look at maybe the last couple of years. I can remember being a child and driving to Richmond. And one of the things you always did was go to Monument Avenue. And now we've seen some major changes toward revisioning Virginia's past. What has it been like to be there when this is all happening?
That is a great question. And, this past summer was a very intense summer, particularly in Richmond. We had, I think, nonstop protest movements throughout 3 months. And it was The intensity of them at times was overwhelming, and there were many, many different communities involved. It's been a reckoning for folks in Richmond, and it's been a reckoning also for folks throughout Virginia to come to terms with our past. And it happened much more quickly than I think any of us could have anticipated. For the past decade or so, we've had legislation or commissions established to take a look at the history of the monuments and to discuss what to do and what next steps to take. There was a lot of talk, but not enough action. I think this was the right time. I think there was such an overwhelming amount of support from many, many different communities. And this includes residents who live on Monument Avenue, a beautiful and historic site, but who understood that these monuments were a testament to pain and considerable grief and a history of disenfranchisement for many, many people. And so the actions we were able to take, I think, were necessary and fundamentally important. And now they give us an opportunity to re-envision what we want our city to be, what we want the Commonwealth to be, and how we're going to be much more exclusive. And I'll just share with you, when my husband and I first we were visiting different cities, interviewing in different positions in 1990. I didn't know a whole lot about Richmond, except that it was the capital of the Confederacy. But back then there was no internet, shocking as that is. And I didn't have a chance to Google or take a look at the city. And I really didn't know anything about Monument Avenue. But we visited Richmond and we just fell in love with it. We thought it was so beautiful. It was Christmas time. But then we drove down Monument Avenue and I was just horrified and shocked that there were these grand structures to the Confederacy. And, in my reckoning, I grew up in Georgia and I left one city. I was leaving one city, Atlanta, that had been burned to the ground during the Civil War, and coming to the capital of the Confederacy. But in my reckoning, these men had always been, Stonewall Jackson, Robert E. Lee, these men, and Jefferson Davis. These were men who had betrayed their oath to the Constitution. They had betrayed their country. They had taken up arms against their country. Robert E. Lee, especially, as a military officer and a man who had sworn an oath to protect this country from all harm, that he had taken up arms against our beloved country. And so I couldn't reconcile when I came to Richmond and saw these monuments that they were standing and had this sense of honor and dignity attached to them. One gets used to seeing them, though. You go after a point, after living here for 30 years, I'd become numb to seeing them, and I hadn't really processed what impact they were. But to see so many of my colleagues who are African American speak about the pain and the sense that these were monuments erected to keep them out, to tell them they don't belong. That was something we had to address. And I'm happy that we're addressing it. And I'm happy that we're going to recreate, re-envision a Richmond that is a city for everyone.
And in many ways, I've always thought Capitol Square was far more inclusive with the monuments there.
Mm-hmm. There was a deliberate attempt to do that in the recent years.
And I was Phi Theta Kappa helped pay for the civil rights monument that's there. And I think our chapter raised $2,000 for that.
Wow. That's impressive.
Diane, you were going to say something? Yeah, we had a yard sale.
A big old yard sale. No, I was just going to say thank you for sharing that perspective, as folks in a community so far from Richmond, we watch it on the news and it just seems like it seems so far away
Yeah.
to those of us who haven't spent a lot of time there just personally. I go up for work a lot, but that's it. So thank you for sharing that, because I think every moment we can have more inclusive conversation and consider other perspectives and opinions about things like that. It helps us learn and helps us grow as well.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
thank you.
Ghazala, we have a question from one of our counselors, Seth Helmandaler. He said, you've just been discussing one version of the past. So how do you see, or what do you see women's history being like 5 to 10 years from now? And how can anyone help foster that regardless of gender identity?
Oh, what a great question. I think we're at a transformative moment in our American history, aren't we? We just elected, and who would have thought this, a few years ago? We just elected a woman of South Asian descent and African American descent as vice president, a woman and a minority woman and a child of immigrants. I think we're at a very transformative moment. I had the honor and the distinct privilege of watching the inauguration from the floor of the Senate that morning, and I'll tell you, I was in tears, and I was moved to give a speech that morning during our points of privilege to talk about the fact that I am standing here, myself as a child of immigrants, as a woman of South Asian descent, and watching another woman being elected to the second highest position in this country. And it just felt like a sea change. And the opportunity that we have now moving forward, we've crossed that hurdle of who is going to be the first woman, and we have an opportunity to really see the role of women change in this country in the next decade. And I think we have the opportunity then to help shape the conversation around women's concerns on a global level. Other women have led other nations, and this is one of, these are developing countries have had women leaders. And it's kind of been an odd sticking point that in America, we have not, we see ourselves as champions of progressive causes and of women's rights and so forth, that we haven't had leadership by women until now. And I think it gives us greater moral authority as a country to be able to say that women's rights matter, women's rights are human rights, that we need to be protective of the opportunities of women's access to education, to those critical social services that women and girls need, and that we have this opportunity to speak with greater voice around issues of the violence that continues to harm women and girls around the world. We can do that with greater clarity, knowing that we have women's leadership in so many ways, not just in state houses, but also in Congress and in the White House as well. And I think there's a lot of work to be done in these areas.
Absolutely. We can look at, well, Benazir Bhutto, Mrs. Gandhi herself, Golda Meir, but in Europe in particular, we have women in power going back 50 years, and they are credited with creating the socially embracing government that takes care of all citizens, in particular women. So yeah, you make an excellent point. But let me ask you, and you sort of echoed one of my own sentiments when you said, when you mentioned your emotional reaction to Kamala Harris. A few years ago, when we elected Barack Obama, and it's, it's not necessary that I am a Barack Obama fan or not. The fact that we are elected Barack Obama was that I felt so proud that we had moved beyond color. And then we have this populist backlash that seemed to, cut us off at the knees. And those happen ever so often. How do you explain those movements?
That's a big question, Brian.
That's,
I don't
and
know
you've
that
got
I can
5 minutes.
5 minutes or less.
Well, the interesting thing, and if I can again add this to it, a few years ago in Southwest Virginia, this was solidly Democratic. Just about every other car you saw driving around had on one side of the bumper a Rick Boucher sticker, and on the other side of the bumper a Jesus Christ sticker. And most every home had a picture of John L. Lewis. I call that the Trinity. What do you think happened? And you can narrow it down to changes in Virginia if you want.
I can't explain what happened in 2016. I just see it as such an aberration, and I'll have to say I see it as a tragic aberration in that unique moment of American history. I think there was, I think there's been, well, a lot of things were happening. There's been considerable fear about the changes that are occurring in this country demographically, in terms of our ethnic diversity that we're seeing. There's anxiety that too much is happening too fast, and that there seems to be this loss of control or power, identity, all of that. But I think also what we saw in 2016 was the spread of information or misinformation that fed into fears that people had, and it caused a great divide in our national sensibility, because people were listening to different ideas, different people, and many of those those information channels were simply false, deliberately false, created to misdirect our consciousness and our understanding. And this is the best argument for good education, right? One thing that we teach is information literacy. And I saw such a fundamental need to continue to help people understand when you're being flooded by information, how to be able to dissect it, how to be able to think critically about it, and how to find channels of reliable information so that you can make good decisions. And education is so fundamentally important. I just see what happened in the last 4 years as an aberration, but I also saw it as an impetus. It was my impetus too, to run for office. Donald Trump came out immediately upon election with this idea of a Muslim ban. And as a Muslim American, it caused me great anxiety. I'll share I had a panic attack one day in February of 2017, not knowing whether this was actually my country anymore, whether I was welcome here. And that morning in particular, I remember well, because there was a story of creating a Muslim registry. It wasn't just banning people coming from Muslim majority countries, but actually to be able to identify Muslim Americans who live here. And it had the same kind of language around it that we saw in the rise of fascism, the rise of Nazi Germany, the registration of Jewish individuals in those communities. That sent chills down my spine. And while that registry didn't gain traction, just the thought that somebody could be sharing this and the idea in its idea in this administration was chilling to me. We actually told our older daughter, who lived in Northern Virginia, to carry her passport with her so that she could prove that she was an American, that she had been born in Richmond. And to have to say that to your child was really disconcerting. So I think we saw this blip in our American history. I think we've seen a reversal of that. It exposed a lot of concerns and issues that we have collectively as a country, but it's also given us an opportunity to address historic wrongs and to really define a future that is much more in line with the vision of democratic ideals that this country was founded on. And I'm very optimistic in that regard.
Thank you so much, Senator Ghazala Hashmi.
I love how you say my name.
Diane, anything?
No, just what a pleasure it's been to pick your brain for a little while and get to listen to you and get to know you a little bit through this medium. So I look forward to hopefully getting to know you better down the road.
Well, anytime you're in Richmond, please come stop by, say hello. Hopefully the
Thank you.
Capitol will be open for our next session, and we'll all be able to meet again during General Assembly.
And I should have said this at the beginning, but assalamu alaikum.
Thank you.
I let it slide. I'm sorry. But thank you so much, Senator. And I guess we can end by saying you are welcome at Southwest Virginia Community College at any time.
Yes.
And we do expect to visit.
I would love to visit. It's my goal to visit every one of our community colleges in the next few months. So I hope to certainly be down there.
Wonderful.
Yeah, we will welcome you with open arms.
Thank you.
And Tracy will cook for you. Tracy, right. Okay, any parting words, Senator?
It's just been such an honor and a real treat. The VCCS is my family. I love and adore all the good work and my colleagues. And I see myself as a mole, M-O-L-E, in the General Assembly working on behalf of the VCCS.
Well, I'm sure that makes Dr. Dubois very happy. But you're right. We have Senator Hashmi with us because of the VCCS and because we truly are a big family. Ghazala and I were able to work on a grant internationalizing campuses in the community college system. And like I said, we've worked together at New Horizons, or at least I aggravated her all the time. And so it is wonderful to have had you for this hour. We appreciate you so much. We appreciate your hard work, and we're here if you need us.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You are
Thank
welcome.
you.
John, take us out.